See you.
So it is for me too. Oh my, we are live! Já estamos ao vivo! Sensacional! Gente, vocês não sabem por quantos anos eu sonhei com esse momento de trazer Eric Zimmerman para Games for Change América Latina. Here he is, Eric himself. Todo mundo conhece o Eric, Rules of Play, tanta coisa incrível que ele já escreveu, né? The Ludic Era, um manifesto lúdico, e agora lançando The Rules We Break, Lessons in Play, Thinking and Design. Ele vai falar em inglês, a gente depois vai legendar, so we're gonna run this in English, no problem, we're gonna then subtitle later. E estamos aqui também com o Lucas Machado, que quem está acompanhando o nosso festival já sabe quem é o Lucas, e o Marcelo Rigon, que também participou em vários momentos, inclusive do pitch, que teve agora à tarde, né? Mas eu não posso revelar ainda os resultados, vão só às 19 horas. Eu vou passar a bola para o Lucas, vou me recolher aqui aos bastidores, e acho que eu volto daqui a pouco para uma participação aí interativa, colaborativa com o Eric. Lucas, obrigado, é com você.
Obrigado, Gilson. Então, primeiro agradecer aí de novo, né, a todo mundo que está assistindo, participando aí da Games for Change, desse nosso 10º festival, né. Eric, I want to thank you so much for being here with us. It's truly an honor to have you here. We are very excited to hear you talking, and from what you already told us, also have an opportunity to play with you live on YouTube. So that's going to be very exciting. So I'm just going to give you the word, and please feel free to begin.
Okay, I'm starting up my slides now, which actually means, unfortunately, I can't see anything except for my slides, but we're just gonna go from here. Thank you, Lucas and Gilson, and I'm so happy to be part of the Games for Change Festival, and also thanks everyone for your patience with my English too. So here's what I want to talk about today. I know we have a little bit less than an hour. I want to leave time for questions and answers. So we'll go pretty quickly through this, but I want to just give a little bit of my background. And I'm really excited to talk about a new project, the book that Gilson mentioned. And we might even do a little bit of play together. So look forward to that. So I'm from Bloomington, Indiana, in North America. I live in New York City. And recently, actually, I became, through marriage, a European citizen as well. So I'm a citizen of Italy, slowly becoming a world citizen, I guess, country by country. I grew up and really had a childhood of play. I grew up in the 70s and 80s. And I think for me, one of the things that really shaped who I am now as a game designer is that games I played, like early computer games, Dungeons and Dragons, neighborhood physical games like Kick the Can and Ghost in the Graveyard. These are some American games. I'm sure that there's similar things in Brazil. We didn't just play, but we were inventing games. My parents were art educators. And, by the way, in the context of Games for Change, I think art education for me is always an interesting model about how to leverage an aesthetic form for learning. In other words, art educators don't try and measure the information flow that's sort of like coming from a painting and somehow magically appearing into people when they view it, but instead they see art as a context for discussion or introspection or cultural critique, and often not just talking, but wonderfully often blurring into making as well. In art education, there's often a very fuzzy line between talking about and doing art. When I was a student, and now I'm talking about when I was first an art student in the late 80s and early 90s, I couldn't study games. There was no degree program or department. And before I was a game designer, I was trained as an artist. I have a BFA and an MFA in fine art. And it was a funny education because on the one hand, I was studying things like Joseph Alber's Interaction of Color, the book over there on the left, which really saw art as sort of a purely visual phenomenon. my professors were from the Yale School, and they would say things like, there are no ideas in art, really meaning like art was about line, color, and composition, this very hardcore modernist idea. But at the same time, in this late 80s, early 90s, that was when postmodernism was really rearing its head. And the other artworks there are from Barbara Kruger's Truisms and Robert Mapplethorpe's Self-Portrait, really the idea of art as a kind of cultural critique, which is so different than that modernist idea of pure form. At the same time, I was emerging from a student into the game industry in the early 90s. And it was a very heady time for technology. There were games, video games were kind of changing form. Wired magazine was around. There were CD-ROMs like this Puppet Motel from Laurie Anderson. And the first wave of VR, that's Dactyl Nightmare, the first VR game I ever played, was happening in the early 90s as well. When I started teaching at NYU, I remember seeing on the floor this poster. And so this is for something called New Voices, New Visions. And this was a contest that was sponsored by Voyager. Actually, Voyager is the one that's doing the Laurie Anderson CD-ROM there. And if you look at the bottom, the judges of this contest, this is like the gatekeepers of digital media now, right? But that's Laurie Anderson, I don't know, Terry Gilliam, Jenny Holzer, Art Spiegelman, who made Mouse, William Gibson, who wrote Neuromancer. These are like the coolest people in culture. But what are they saying? Do not enter this contest if you want home shopping encyclopedias and video games to define the information superhighway. So yeah, remember we used to say things like information superhighway, but games were really kind of like the nerdy stepchildren of the family, and nobody wanted them around. So in my career as a game designer, I was kind of swam up through this cultural soup, and it's just been amazing to see how games have transformed. These are some of my early games that I did. Gearheads was my first commercial release I did with RGA Interactive in New York City. CD-ROM, that was a very big deal, big CD-ROM technology. And Sissy Fight 2000, which was a game that I did with Word.com about little girls in conflict on a schoolyard. I started a studio called Gamelab. We grew to about 30 people in New York City. And with Peter Lee, I should say, co-founded the company. We did a lot of games with people like Lego and HBO and MTV. We did a lot of original games. Diner Dash was our biggest game. I also, Gamelab also spun off the Institute of Play, which was a nonprofit that created whole schools where we looked at the intersection of games and play. And I wasn't full-time. Yes.
Just so you know about the comments, Renata said a couple of slides ago that one of the books you put there was one of her favorite books ever. I'm trying to figure out which one made her go the way of semiotics. So,
interaction of color.
Interaction of color, probably. Yeah.
Ah, okay. Yes.
So just so you know.
Yeah. Maybe it like made you quit the art world. I love it. Yeah. Please jump in. I love the. I can't see any of the comments, so that's great, Lucas, to jump in with that. So anyway, just moving forward to more recent work, I've been doing digital games. The one on the right is from Dear Reader. That's a game I did with Local Number 12 that uses public domain literature as the basis for word puzzle games. It's an Apple Arcade now. I also work off the computer doing tabletop games of different sorts. And I've also been doing these large-scale museum installations with architect Nathalie Pozzi that sometimes are performances that take over a whole building. In my academic career, I've been working at the NYU Game Center, teaching since we started about 12 years ago and helping design the curriculum. I write books like Rules of Play and the Game Design Reader that I co-wrote or co-authored with Katie Salen. And so anyway, that's all background. Today, I want to share a new project. And here it is, The Rules We Break. I'm very excited to share this. Honestly, this book is not available yet. Next week, I think Tuesday is the official launch date. So Very few people have seen this book or been able to look inside it. So today we're going to get a sneak peek. And really, it is a book about all the ways that I teach game design. So the book is organized around systems, play, and design. And the idea is that games are the occasion for understanding these kinds of fundamental ways of thinking and doing and being. And the book is not just for game people, but I really wanted to share with everyone outside of games, and specifically what in games is kind of interesting or valuable, especially game design. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the book, some of the ideas behind it, share some of the bits with you, give you that sneak preview, and also maybe play a little bit together. The book is divided into those 3 sections. So the first one is play. And each section has little miniature essays, so a few ways to think about play. But most of each chapter are exercises. In play, there's social exercises, physical exercises, and playing with meaning. So here you can see in systems, again, this is just the table of contents, which I guess you're supposed to do if you're doing a book talk. I don't know. But the essays and exercises, and then design is the 3rd section as well. Those little essays look like this. So here's an essay from play. They're all 1-page essays. So this is the entire essay. Try to make it short. This is like our modern short attention span writing style. But being someone else is about identity and how when we play games, we take on other identities and what that could mean. And a culture of critique is about, it's in the design section, so it's more focused on the design process. And in this case, it's really talking about how you inculcate a culture where everyone feels comfortable and interested in giving and receiving critique of each other's work. So just to give you a sense of the range of the kind of writing. But the bulk of the book are these exercises. They're actual activities that you do. So it's more, this is really like a recipe book where it's like, you can read about stuff, but it's meant to be a facilitator for you doing something. And the exercises in the book are exercises that I have done with kids, with my students at NYU, undergrad and graduate students, with creative leads at some of the biggest companies in the world. So professionals and non-professionals. So they are hopefully time-tested and valuable. In this case, Utopia 2099 is a simple little dice game that's in the system section. And just to show you a little bit how they're structured, in this case, if you look at the what you learn section of it, it talks about learning about randomness and probability, but also about the process of balancing through experimentation and iteration, and also about how a game can represent or depict certain kinds of themes. So the kind of interface between form and content in the context of a participatory dynamic system like a game. And it's all a simple little dice game that you balance as you play. This is the more of Utopia 2099. And as you can see, I try to split it up so that the black text, the 2, 3, 4, that's if you just are running the exercise and want to know how it works. The red text are questions that you can talk about. So those are all sort of discussion questions. I'm going to lean in close so I can see what it says. It says like, discuss what determines the pace of the game. Or how do changes that you do result in a particular experience? So the book is really structured to be something that can quickly lead you through the exercises, but then it's also kind of a teaching manual as well for someone leading a workshop or class about it. But enough talk. Let's do a little bit of the playing. I have a couple exercises. The first one is for a small group. The second one, hopefully all of us will get to play a little bit. So this is a very quick exercise called Zen counting. And I have to say that not all the games and play and exercises in the book are things that I invented. I also did a lot of curation from some of my from folk games, and also from some of my game design heroes. And this game definitely comes from someone who's been incredibly influential on me, Bernie DeKoven, who sadly passed away a few years ago. And this exercise this game, I should say, is in his book, The Infinite Playground. But let's play. So I think think now, actually, maybe what I'll do is, why don't we stop I'm going to stop my slides for a second, and I'm going to look back at the, if you want to take my slides off screen.
Yeah, Gilson, if you can take the slides off screen.
Oh,
and
right.
Us.
If I stop sharing, okay, that's up to me. Okay, so is Gilson also joining us? Okay. Oh,
I
Renata,
think so.
great.
Yeah, come on, Gilson.
Renata,
join us as well.
More the merrier. 4 is okay. 5 is even better. Yeah. But this is a game called Zen Counting, and it's okay if it's just the 4 of us. Here's how it works. Okay. When we start, we're all going to close our eyes. So everyone is going to see us with our eyes closed. I guess the audience can tell us if we're cheating or not. And whoever wants to, whoever feels so moved, is going to start by counting. Now, I can't count in Portuguese. I apologize for that. So maybe we could count in English if that's okay.
Yeah,
but
sure.
Someone is just going to start with a 1, and then someone else will say 2, and someone else will say 3. And the only rule is that you can't say a number twice in a row. So if I say 3, I can't say 4. I have to wait for someone else to say 4. Then I could come in with 5 if I wanted to. And here's, so you can't count twice in a row. And the only trick is that if 2 of us say a number at the same time, if we speak at the same time, or even if we overlap a little bit, we have to start over from 1. Okay.
Okay.
So. All right, my eyes are closed now. I think all of our eyes are closed, and we'll just, whoever's so moved can start the game.
1.
Whoop.
Okay, so.
All right, let's try again.
1.
2.
3.
4.
5.
6.
All right, wait. Let's try one more time. I'm enjoying this. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Breathe. Take a deep breath. In and out. Okay. Let's try again.
1.
2.
3.
4.
5.
6.
7. Oh, we got one farther. Wow, that's great. I would love to keep playing, but let's talk about Zen counting just for a second. Often there's a goal of trying to get to 10, but then also people often sometimes can find a pattern or a way of breaking the game, and they can go much higher. So in terms of an exercise, like, okay, well, actually, let me ask the 3 of you, what was your experience of Zen counting? Anything that you want to say?
I think it was great because mostly I was trying to guess how each of you react, like if we're more anxious or not, or something like that, to know if like I have to wait more or I have to go ahead because someone that's more anxious has just said a number or something like that.
Yeah. It actually reminded me a lot of a card game named The Mind.
Yes.
Maybe. Yeah. And at the same time that, like Marcelo said, you're trying to figure out how people are going to react and count. I found it interesting, given that it's also called Zen counting, that at some point, I don't know from where, in the silence, I could hear the birds. So it was an interesting experience. So, yeah.
Renata, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm terrible with counting. You know, I really like terrible with numbers. So it was kind of like a very intense game for me.
I see added layers of challenge, but I noticed that you were the one that was counting first every time.
Because I thought that was the safest way.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
So I So okay. Anyway, thank you so much for that. It's just so every time I play this game, it's really quite different.
You want to share your slides again?
Yeah. Well, I will. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Let me get back to the slides. So I just need to get back into presentation mode and okay. I think I can share the slides now.
Okay.
Let me know when we're ready to go.
Yeah.
Okay.
We are ready to go. Yeah.
So how is this an exercise? I think in it there's a number of different ways that you could use this, right? So one thing is, even forgetting about the design, I find that Zen counting can sometimes just be a way to get a group into a kind of collaborative sync, right? In other words, it can just be an interesting warm-up activity if you're going to do a group brainstorm or a deeper collaboration. And it is a way that kind of tunes you into other people just by the nature of the gameplay. We also can go deeper. We can analyze it, right? So for example, Lucas, you said that it does, it made you hear the birds. So the question is, what about the design, the specific idea of the design makes it meditative or makes you listen to the silences? And also, I think another thing to talk about with the design is really discussing how it gets played, right? So the rules are one thing, but the experience is another. And I think, for example, Renata's comment about, always counting on one so that it was a kind of a safe bet. I thought it was interesting that we sort of kept on getting better. We made it to 6, and then we made it to 7. And I wonder what the first thing we made it to 1, I think. Then we made it to 6, and then we made it to 7. So what was it that we were getting better at, right? That's something interesting to talk about as well. Just to say that there are lots of, I think these exercises often are very, very simple, and this is one of the simplest ones in the whole book, but there's still a lot of dimensions to talk about. And in the book, as you can see, again, this is just what Zen counting looks like. There are the steps for doing it, and then discussion questions that sort of lead you through a deeper conversation with everyone that just played. So what, right? So, okay, we had fun. We played a game. We can talk about it. What's the big deal about these playful exercises? They definitely emerged from how I teach game design. But if this book is not meant to be just for game designers, then really what is it about beyond that? The whole premise of Games for Change, as far as I understand, maybe there's multiple premises, but is that something different is happening today in society and across cultural media. That if the 20th century was about the rise of information and the moving image, something else is happening in the 21st century, right? Media is becoming more participatory, more interactive, more modular, more systemic. And games just happen to be an ancient cultural form that is modular, systemic, participatory, customizable. Every game is a system of inputs and outputs for exploring cause and effect. So games are about how games can help us understand how literacy works in the 21st century. And they're also about practicing and designing and expanding and inventing with that literacy as well. Because part of the so what is about how these ideas about games and design and systems and play connect to the real world. For example, how democracy, I know that Brazil just went through a very, very intense election, and this is from the American system, but how is democracy a design problem, for example, with all kinds of systems that can get gamed? This is the kind of thinking that we need in order to really think about how systems can get played and what are the ethical questions about when is something, for example, creative play, and when is it exploiting the system in a way that is goes against the spirit of what the system was meant to do. So you can learn game design from this book. So I think that you hopefully can learn how to make good games through the exercises from this book. But on a bigger level, the Rules We Break is about teaching design in the big sense of design through play. problem solving, collaboration, and how to make new kinds of meaning. And the concepts in the book are really three handles for wrapping our heads around all of this. And like I said before, the book is less about information that you're supposed to learn and memorize as much as it is a recipe book for doing things, for playing around, for coming up with projects, for modding and making through play itself. Just to talk a little bit about the details of the book and in the three sections, play for me is about the messy, wild, creative improvisation of playing. And more than just goofing around, play for me is a profound way of understanding how we relate to each other, how meaning is made, and how to critically engage with the world. The little essays in the play section are about things like conflict, emergence, desire, collaboration, and different kinds of rules and how to break those rules. The games in the play section are often physical playground style games that I have found are amazing for getting minds moving, for unlocking and unblocking creativity. But there are also these playground games, great places for talking about the fundamentals of games. In Ninja, for example, part of what we talk about is, if you know Ninja, it's kind of like a playground game that emerged out of comic cons and things like that. It's an amazing system which makes everybody feel like a lightning fast ninja in this playground game, and I think it has amazing lessons about how games can represent or depict their subject matter, but not through dialogue and images, but through the rules of the game itself, through procedural representation, through algorithmic processes. Zen counting is also in this section on play as well. Systems section takes a close look at how the parts of a complex structure interrelate to form a whole. And the essays in the systems section dive deep into the ways that systems behave. For example, they look at randomness, feedback loops, positive and negative feedback loops, desire, representation, but they also connect to real world systems. So some of the little micro essays in this section talk about why is it that board games so often use colonialist themes as their narrative subject matter, or how redlining residential districts, which is something that in the United States refers to racial exclusion from certain neighborhoods of a city, is a positive feedback loop that is also part of systemic racism. So systems looks in at games, but it also looks at how we can apply this knowledge to systems outside of games as well. The exercises in systems are often a little more nerdy because we are talking about understanding how the parts of a system works. This one is called Get Out, and as you can see, it's a simple puzzle-like game where there's a character named Uta that can only move in a straight line. So here you can see that you can trace kind of her way out of the maze. And the challenge in the design exercise is for players to make puzzles that are interesting. So you start off with just walls that can block on this grid. This is on a tabletop, so you're putting little pieces of paper and things can move around. And you can basically design a puzzle or level that way. And then the group starts to invent new kinds of dynamic elements that everyone can put into their puzzles. And I actually use this exercise not just to talk about puzzle design and systems understanding, but actually to do fundamentals of level design, which is always about designing more complicated systems out of elemental units, the kind of poetics of the way a haiku can be expressive. How can you make something that's expressive with just these simple little structural elements? Or narrative design also is part of systems too. So this is a project where you are designing a deck of stories, which is a collection of cards that you shuffle, and every time you read through them, it creates a coherent narrative every time. Design uses games as the occasion to practice how to invent new ideas and new projects. So the emphasis in design is on rapid prototyping and iteration through playtesting. You explore ideas by actually making things. The essays here are about collaboration and brainstorming. So there's different techniques for that: creativity, how to critique, education and its relationship design, communication. And the exercises are often longer projects. So in this case, you fix a broken card game. This is the classic game War that, as everyone knows, is totally random and lasts too long. So this is one of several games that are listed that are 2-player card games that are there for people to play, analyze, and then redesign and fix. Of course, there are also much more open-ended projects in design as well. So working on those more open-ended projects, the design section helps you brainstorm them, play test them, and make them through the iterative process of design. For example, Passion Deck brainstorming is an exercise where each participant makes a deck of things that interest them. So imagine you have a bunch of index cards, and you write a half dozen or a dozen things that interest you. Maybe they have to do with games. Maybe they have to do with, your favorite food, or your political ideas. You put them into a deck, and then you do speed dating around the room. People are paired up, and they each turn over a card. And you and I have 2 minutes to brainstorm an idea for a game that uses both of the things on the cards, my passionate interest and your passionate interest. What can we do with that? Of course, this brainstorming technique doesn't have to just be used to make games. You could use this to solve all kinds of problems, or do all kinds of brainstorming exercises using this particular technique to spark new ideas. And I wanted to do one more exercise that also comes from the design section. It was hard to choose one that I wanted to do, one that wasn't just a small group, but we all could do, but we're all online. And so, but I think I found one, which was, we're going to try one called A Good Collaborator. This is an exercise that I've used many times. I use it in school with students, but I also use it outside of school. And I'm going to lead you through it for a second. Lucas, I'm going to stop sharing. It begins with this question: what makes a good collaborator? So I'm just going to get this on my screen. You can see what
we can see it. Yeah.
Program I'm using. Actually, you know what? I'm going to make this document maybe the text a little bit bigger. So here's the question that I want to ask everybody, and I'm going to take notes while you're all, I guess, texting to Lucas. This doesn't just have to be the people whose videos are here. This can be anyone.
Actually,
anyone watching who wants to.
Okay. But we have here 6 people in total, so I think it's going to work very well as well.
Okay. All right. Well, all right. Whatever you say, Lucas, I will follow your lead. Okay. The question is, what makes a good collaborator? What is one thing that makes a good collaborator? Somebody tell me.
Listening.
Purpose.
Okay.
Purpose.
What's that?
Purpose.
Purpose. To have a purpose.
To have a purpose for what? Give me a little more detail on that, Luca.
So that you can join in a common task. To have a common goal. Task, a common goal.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So to have a purpose. So this is and. Okay, let's keep brainstorming.
Empathetic.
Yes.
Okay.
Were you thinking about that too?
Can you give me a little more detail on that?
I was saying that it was about not being too attached to your own ideas.
Ooh, I think that's even different than empathetic, but I love that one too. Okay, and what does that mean, not being too attached to your own ideas? Any a little more detail on that one?
It's because, when you're collaborating, your goal is not to win people over to your own way of doing something, but instead it's about trying to find a new way together. That's what I had in mind.
Okay. That, by the way, correct me if I'm not taking the right notes, if I'm distorting what you're saying. I'm just the secretary right now. Empathetic. What do we mean by empathetic? Whoever said that one,
I
or
think
someone else wants to
be able to put yourself in someone else's shoes, like to imagine what makes someone have the sort of ideas and perspectives that they have.
Okay. And what does that mean about how you're gonna collaborate with someone? What is an empathetic person? How do they behave in a group?
Well, one of the things is already there, like they are able to listen. They don't impose their ideas. They
Right.
Express themselves respectfully and giving room for criticism.
Oh, I love this. Okay. Okay. Now, sorry, you can see I'm misspelling in real time. I'm supposed to know English, right? So wait, what's not up here? Think about people that you love collaborating with on something. What makes them someone that you're always hoping that you end up working with them?
Be creative, I think.
What do we mean by creative? What does that mean?
The person has ability to see a lot of sides of the question and to propose new paths for the project or anything.
Love that. Anything else? And by the way, we have pretty like psychological, intellectual things. There can be very practical things on this too that make someone a good collaborator.
So I'm Italian, so I need to have someone that we go to lunch together and we have some fun, not just walking all the time.
I actually love that.
Maybe we could also say that you're saying that doesn't, well, how do we say in English? Doesn't live to work, but works to live. No, that's not quite right. But maybe is this about finding a balance, a work-life balance, or a little bit? Okay. Again, correct me if I'm work-life.
I guess also having more than a professional relationship, I think, is also what he means. Like, it's not just about the work; it's about sharing experiences with your.
I was gonna say
colleagues.
The exact same thing with another words from another angle. I was going to say that psychologically, you collaborate better with people that you feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
So what?
That's what I'm going to say. Psychologically, if you feel comfortable around someone, then you feel more at ease. Because sometimes if you're like intimidated by someone, you get shy and you can't really bring all of your best to the table.
What helps you be comfortable with other people? Like, what is the behavior that good collaborators have?
Eye contact.
Oh, okay.
So kind of bodily experience that makes you feel at ease and not afraid of, making eye contact and looking for something that is in the air, so to speak.
Renata, what were you going to say?
I was going to say that what helps also is a sense of curiosity, when you are curious about somebody else, so that you ask questions and you find something in common.
I'll be very practical right now, like reliability.
Yeah, that's what I mean by more practical stuff.
That's a very good one, actually.
Yeah, that's a good one. Reliability. And what can you expand on that a little bit, or can someone expand?
It's something like you can count on that person. You can decide who will be doing what, and he will give you back what what was decided that everyone was doing.
Reciprocity.
As a separate one or as part of reliability?
I would say it's part of reliability. It's to be reciprocal.
Love these. This is such a great list. So let's just pause there. I feel like we could go on, but okay. What is this exercise about? So we made this amazing list. I use this exercise. Well, first of all, I think we should all hope to possess all of these good qualities. I think we can look at things there and think about what we need to work on individually. The way I use this exercise in a class is that often when we're at the beginning of a semester or sometimes at the start of a group, I have the whole class or sometimes individual groups actually brainstorm a list of what it means to be a good collaborator. And then I hold them responsible to that for the rest of the project or the rest of the semester. So the kind of the tricky part of this is that they don't realize this, but they are kind of coming up with the ideal model for what it means to be a designer, especially a collaborator. And they're kind of creating the criteria by which I'm asking them to judge themselves and each other. And there's a lot of ways that you can use a list like this in class, in a class situation or in a professional situation too. For example, it's something that you can return to from time to time. If you have check-ins and postmortems, you can evolve the list, add to it, edit to it. You can make priorities. I also find that when there is creative conflict in a list, for example, it really helps if you have reliability on your list, but there is someone who's coming late to meetings consistently, you can say, hey, look, we all agreed that we were going to have reliability as a value. And so it helps not point the finger, but instead to say, hey, do we want to change that? Is having fun more important than reliability, right? So what's the hierarchy and priority here? By the way, this was an amazing list. I know this seems incredibly simple, like Zen counting, but it is, I think, an incredibly useful exercise and tool that I use in virtually every class where I have the students collaborating together. It also serves the purpose of just making people realize that collaboration is a skill that we're working on. It doesn't just happen, right? It doesn't just sort of magically, the people of a group don't magically come together. They come together when everybody has an awareness that they need to behave properly, be sensitive to others, not be too attached to their ideas, to listen to each other's, right? Everything that's on this list. So it's a really useful exercise in a lot of ways. All right, I think I'm gonna go back to my slide. Anyway, let's thank you everybody for participating. Thanks. Give yourselves a round of applause, and also for the earlier game too. Thank you very much. This was great. And as you can see, in just like 5 or 10 minutes, we're able to kind of put together a really useful list through this exercise. Okay, I'm going back to, I'm still sharing screen, so I'm gonna go back to my slides. Okay, that's the exercise. And I guess the only other thing I wanted to say about this is that I have a confession to make, which is that I am not always a great collaborator. I myself often get excited and talk over other people when we're brainstorming or trying to do design work together. I'm not a good listener. I have a big ego, and sometimes I can just kind of trample over my collaborators and my excitement to explore my own ideas. And also, I should say that as like an institutionally privileged white male person, I'm the last person who should be doing all of those kinds of things. So I am not a great collaborator. And so maybe as a horrible collaborator, it's kind of ironic that I have an exercise about being a good collaborator. But I just want to make it clear that these exercises in this book are not about me thinking that I figured everything out and I'm preaching from on high and, I'm delivering all the wisdom. They really are techniques that I use to try and become better myself as a better designer. And we can all become better designers, collaborators, researchers, creators, thinkers, people, including me, of course. And so that's a quick tour of my book and a couple of examples of play, Zen counting, and a good collaborator. And I'm so happy to share this book with you. Again, whether you're a designer that maybe wants to use these techniques for design and creative play in your workplace, or maybe you just want to play with and challenge your students or friends or teammates. All of us here know the many ways that games and game design thinking can help. I mean, that's really what the, this Games for Change conference is all about. Help this very broken world in which we live, and help us better understand each other and ourselves. And that's it. Thank you very much. The Rules We Break is out Tuesday of next week. I think that's November 22nd. And you can find more information and pre-order the book worldwide, I believe, at theruleswebreak.com. Okay, I am breaking out of my presentation and I will stop sharing. So that's the sneak preview of the new book. And thanks everybody for coming, and thanks for all the collaborative play. That was a lot of fun. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I think we have time for some question and answer discussion.
Yeah, of course. I was just going to ask if someone here in the StreamYard or in YouTube, if anyone has any questions, any comments they would like to begin with. Well, in that case, I do then. So Eric, a lot of things came to my mind when you were talking. I think it was a wonderful talk. I would have a lot of things to discuss with you about those ideas on playing and on systems and stuff. But one thing that called my attention when you were talking about changing the system or somehow modding the system, this always brings to my mind this expression: "It's not a bug, it's a feature," right? So how sometimes games themselves have, digital games have this peculiarity, which is even if you don't plan it or if you don't do it intentionally, they sort of sometimes give you results that are unexpected and somehow are incorporated into the game themselves. So do you think games are digital? Of course, you gave a lot of examples, not only of digital games, but do you think digital games are a particularly interesting instance of where we can see this role that breaking rules has in making us play?
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting kind of observation to make. And I think that for me as a designer, the trick is to try and embed that sort of improvisation where we can incorporate sort of happy accidents and unexpected things into the design process itself. So, in the field of Games for Change, where you often have researchers or educators or media companies kind of doing educational media, I often see that because there's often, for a grant proposal or a corporate program, you have to really kind of figure everything out in advance, right? So you have to kind of say, I'm applying for this big research grant, and here's what we're going to do, and here's how we're going to do it, and here's what it's going to look like, and here are the conclusions that we're going to reach or not reach. And I think that the challenge is, can we shift the paradigm so that there's more kind of exploration as we go? In other words, I find what's interesting about those, what you're saying is that those kinds of happy accidents happen when there's a kind of, in English, is it true in Portuguese that we use the word play? What is it? Is it
yeah, here's the thing. It can be translated into two different words, depending on either jogar, which is more like playing an actual game.
Like a soccer player.
Or brincar, which would be like kids playing, role playing or something in that sense, something that is more open, less.
But is there, in English, we have this idea of like gears, that there's kind of free play between the gears. Is that also in Portuguese as well?
I'm not sure. I'm not.
No, not that.
I don't think so.
But
unique to English.
Yeah. So but I like that English understanding of play, because it is about how you need to have a little bit of that kind of looseness that can lead you to places that you didn't expect. And I think that there's nothing wrong with kind of mapping out educational software or research projects that are more conventional. But I think if we're going to do things that kind of break rules and boundaries, I think that that's something that this sort of design thinking maybe can lend itself to in these other approaches.
But actually, I was thinking, Renata, maybe there's something close to that sense in English. Like, we wouldn't say play, but you would say that you have some game. Like, você tem algum jogo, né? Esse sentido de ter um espaço.
Okay.
You get it? Like,
Yes.
Mas eu acho. I'm sorry, I'm gonna go back to English.
Yeah.
But I think that the way that Eric was talking about what's that play, o que está em jogo, that has something to do, but I don't think it's exactly the same. You know, I think there's like a subtlety there, because I think in the English sense it's more physical. I think it's more physical. You know,
yeah. But the word play. So this kind of leads me to I'm sorry that we're just talking about linguistics here, but it's important because, you know, in English we say things like the play of shadows on the wall, for example.
We do that in Portuguese too. Yeah.
Yeah, or we say that, like, for example, a child is walking playfully. But what do we mean when we say that? For me, what that means is that, you know, there's a way of walking which is just getting from point A to point B in a utilitarian way, right? I'm just crossing space. I'm just walking in the most efficient manner possible. When we see a child who's playfully walking, maybe they're spinning around, maybe they're walking backwards, maybe they're trying not to step on the cracks. They're taking the body motions of walking, and also the utilitarian practice of walking that's just about transportation, and they're playing with it, right? They're finding ways of doing kind of what you're not supposed to be doing if walking is just about efficient transportation. So that to me this is how play is such a rich concept, because play always plays with something else. In this case, we're talking about playful walking. And I think that when the relevance of the book is that so many aspects of our lives are about network systems of information and technology, and we live inside these systems. So the value of the book, hopefully, is that in this, ludic century, quote unquote, that I talked about, being playful means that we don't take these systems for granted, that we find new ways of creatively using them, misusing them, inhabiting them, redesigning them. And I think that can go for everything from thinking about political systems, again, to thinking about what a research process is, and are there ways of playing with the structures of a research process or collaboration or of interdisciplinary collaboration in order to find new ground. So my hope is that the exercises in the rules we break are ways that people can use to help train in that sort of thinking.
Perfect. I think Luca has a question or comment.
Yes. We have that in Italian. We say gioco between gears. That's
what I meant. I think there is too that in Portuguese. Like tem jogo entre as.
Jogo, yes.
Do say.
Interesting.
I must say I'm slightly starstruck because the year that Rules of Play came out, it was when I started university, and now I'm working in the field, and I'm happy to be in this call right now. But anyway, my question was about we were talking about language and culture and how we perceive these things differently. I did a presentation yesterday about games and systems that owes a lot to you. And the question is about, let's say, indigenous ways of knowing broadly, and maybe Renata can also come in. We have on one side the formal systems thinking of Gregory Bateson and Berta Lampion from Förster and all of that. And then we have systemic way of thinking, we might call them, in how indigenous people relate to their environment, which includes different forms of play. And I've been because I've been working in rural areas in Southeast Asia in particular. And I'm trying to wrap my head around about these two things feel similar, but one of them feels a lot more well, it is Western. It is Western. So I'm trying to
Right.
reconcile those different systemic ways of thinking through play. And I was wondering if you had any thought about that.
Yeah, to be honest, I also have been looking into references that are talking about indigenous ways of thinking, or let's say non-European ways of thinking about systems. One book I've been really enjoying is called I think it's called The Invention of Everything, which is looking at the kind of a lot of ancient history of humans, and how it says that there was a kind of tremendous experimentation. Yes, there it is. Yeah. So there's I think one thing is that my understanding is that indigenous thinking is not one thing, right? It's we can't kind of put our finger on it and say, oh, it's this. I often find that what interests me about indigenous thinking, and there's another book I read recently called Sand Talk that's also quite interesting. Oh, also, okay, Luca's got all these books on his shelf. I'm sure you're reading more than me, so excellent. I feel like we're starting our own book club. But I feel like it's often in traditional systems thinking, in which I would include formalist games systems thinking, like understanding rules and structures and systems and cybernetic feedback loops. There's really this idea of a kind of a closed system, right? There's a kind of a love for the idea of well, we kind of, even if it's an artificial boundary, we make that artificial boundary and we kind of see how everything interacts with each other. And it's really the game as a game and not how it interacts as much with its context. And I think part of a lot of what I see as again, sort of so-called indigenous approaches to systems are really about making connections between things that normally maybe we wouldn't connect. I mean, the obvious one is a kind of ecological thinking, which, says like, no, it's not just about you and your, personal habits of waste or sustainability, but like how it connects with everyone else and how it becomes a larger system. But also, how historical systems connect with the present, or even how, religious and spiritual systems connect with things that very much we wouldn't think have anything to do with that. So systems for me is about how parts interrelate to each other to form a whole. So, and there's not one way to understand a phenomenon. So I think that part of our responsibility as designers is when we're analyzing systems or thinking about our work as systems is to really be very clear about what limitations we're putting on through our frame of analysis. But this is such a big topic. I feel like we could do a whole conference on it. It's hard to put into one answer to a question, but thanks.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
To this point, we are already actually coming to our time, to the moment we have to conclude.
Yeah. Speaking of limitations. Yeah.
Yeah. But to this point of actually making a whole congress about this, I would like to actually conclude this session. First of all, thank you so much, Eric. That was great. Thanks so much for everyone who came and volunteered to participate in this experiment with us. But to the point of making a whole congress on this, I would just like to say that my next intention with the conclusion of this congress is to convince Gilson to make the next Games for Change about decolonial practices and thought. So I think that would be
idea.
Great, given everything that we saw in this congress.
Yeah,
so yeah,
that's a good idea.
I would like to conclude with this. Thank you guys so much for everything, and we are going to see you in the final celebration of
and thanks everybody. Congratulations on an amazing Games for Change Latin America conference.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Bye, folks.